Indian education system is different than that in the West. My school worked in shifts. First shift was for science student, and second one for commerce students. I was a student of second shift. My seat was third bench in front row, shared with my best friend Ira. During first shift, it was used by two guys, Akash and Ansh, both 17. It so happened that once they wrote something bad about girls on the bench, which Ira and I noticed, and we wrote against them. Next day, they left a note on the bottom roof of the bench, apologizing and introducing themselves. Ira and me found it fun, and we replied back. This way we kept exchanging letters every day, without seeing each other, talking about stuffs, but not sharing any contact details. One day they wrote about how they want to meet us, and we should wait for them on school's front gate before second shift starts. But we flatly refused since we were not up for anything serious. We also made clear that there will be no more letters exchanged, and we should stop it now. But the next day before our class, the guys came to our class, giving the excuse that they left something on their table. Meanwhile, just to check me and Ira out, that was the first time we saw them as well. After that, there was no conversation between us. Then one day, when I was entering school, I saw one of my friends, Ayushi, having a chat with Akash. I was puzzled, so I asked her in class. She told me Akash lives near her house, and he proposed her, and how they're in a relationship. I felt strange, and felt like telling her that the guy seems weird, but she was so much in love, I was scared she'll break our friendship. So after a few days, I get a call from this strange number. I pick it up, and it was Akash. He told me he got my info from Ayushi, and just wanted to be friends with me since now he was my friend's boyfriend. I told him fine. We chatted sometimes for a few days, and everything was fine until one day he proposed me. I made him clear that I'm not interested in him, and now I am not up for chat. He began begging me not to do that. I blocked his number and he got a new number. He started emotionally blackmailing me through messages that he'd kill himself if I don't talk. He would make small cuts in his hands and send pics. He told me we should marry and have babies. I ignored them and blocked the second number, then the third, then the fourth. I felt like telling my parents, but I was scared their solution would be taking away my phone, so I never did. After a while, it stopped. We completed schooling and all started a new journey to college. During 2013, when I was pursuing graduation, I got his friend request on my Facebook account. I didn't accept, but we had mutual friends and he could see some of my pics. He made some borderline vulgar comments, and I blocked him on Facebook. He again got my number, which I had changed by now, but since we had mutual friends, it was easy for him to get. He tried to pretend he was someone else, saying he was X's friend, and he saw me at that party, and found me gorgeous and all that, but I somehow knew it was him, and I told him I am not interested in talking to strangers. Again, he tried to emotionally blackmail me, telling me he's standing outside my house, and he can do anything to me, harm me. I knew he wasn't outside since none of my classmates knew my house. Also, I was already going through a rough time due to my mom's ill health, so I buzzed him off and gave him a last warning that next time I'll go directly to the police. He again stopped then, only to start once again with one more new number after a few days. He began sending me horrific messages, telling me he'll get me gang raped by his friends, and voice messages telling me how they'll rape me and enjoy it. I was at college at that time, and I decided that today I'll tell my mom everything, and we'll complain to the police. I was standing near my college room's window and thinking when I saw Akash roaming on another street's road. I got shit scared. I was sure he got to know my college's location and he was stalking me. I had told my college friends about it, and we decided to complain about him then and there, since my location was just 1 minute away from that area's police station. We got there and told the police everything. They arrested him. And then there was a lot of drama with family involved. Police seized his phone and got that I wasn't the only girl he was sending messages to. There were a few more. In fact, he sent visual, explicit materials as well. Also, he had videos of the how to kill without leaving a clue and how to stab with a knife type. I was glad I took action before it was too late. His mom cried a lot and apologized on his behalf and requested that I take my complaint back. But my dad flatly refused. My dad was really angry with me for not telling him until now. He's in prison right now. Last year, the court punished him with 7 years of imprisonment. His family is trying to appeal in higher court now. I just hope he never comes out. This happened to me in 8th grade. So I was only 13 to 14 years old. Me and my best friend at the time, who happened to be my classmate also, Ella, decided to skip some classes. It was a wonderful spring day and we wanted to go for a walk, to enjoy the beautiful things that nature has to offer for that season. After 1 hour or 2 of wandering the streets, not far from the school in my neighborhood, we decided to go to a small park which was in the opposite direction. It wasn't an unknown territory, so we continued our walk pretty relaxed. Just before arriving at the park, there was this particular street that wasn't very populated. Not in a deserted way, but very few people walked by. Just as we reached the middle of this street, we noticed some people behind us, behaving pretty strange. There was a girl, maybe in her early 20s, accompanied by 2 boys younger than her. We started to walk a little faster, and they seemed to follow us. When we finally made it to the park, we hopped on a bench and kept our eyes on the strangers. They stopped a few meters from the entrance and spoke to one another for some minutes, glaring at us. I told Ella that I have a very bad feeling about this, and that if they enter the park, we should leave immediately. She said she felt the same way, and she agreed with me. A few minutes passed by, and the 3 of them made their way into the park, still looking at us constantly. We instantly got up and walked to the other end of the park, leaving to make our way back to the neighborhood. On that same bloody street, They caught up to us and began to ask for directions to some church. Ironic, huh? We said we haven't heard of that church and tried to leave. That's when the shit started to get real. The woman got in front of us, starting to ask for money. When we refused to give her any, she pulled a knife out of her pocket and said that she would stab us right then and there if we wouldn't give her all of our money and jewelry. It's important to mention at this time I was obsessed with rings, so I had my fingers full of them. Somehow, before they got to us, I had the bright idea to put my phone underneath my shirt, just in case. Needless to say, I was scared shitless at this point. I felt my heartbeat rising with every second that was passing. But I tried very hard to hide this from the attackers. Until this day, I have no idea where I found the courage to say no right into her face. Ella instead was freaking out. She was crying, shaking and begging them to leave us alone. She even gave them her money. I, on the other hand, knew that this kind of behavior would only make things worse. I told her to calm down and tried to find a way to escape. I saw a man walking across the street and started to yell, hoping that he would come to see what was happening. But he hadn't even looked on our way. The woman got angrier and told the other guys to take our jewelry by force. Of course, they came for me first. I had at least 7 or 8 rings, but I knew how to hold my hand in a position that they wouldn't come off. I started to fight back and hit them as hard as I could. One of them even bit my hand. During this whole mess, I remembered that at the end of the street there was a supermarket, and more important, they had security. I knew that we have to try to get there as fast as we could, so I waited for a moment of distraction from the attackers, grabbed Ella's hand, and ran. They tried to catch us, but I fought them all the way to the supermarket stairs. We didn't stop until we got to the middle of the shop. After catching our breaths, and made sure they didn't follow us into the supermarket, we made our way to the security guy. I told him what happened and asked him to keep an eye out for them until we called somebody to come and pick us up. Ella called her boyfriend to come and help us, and after she told him this story, he said that he knew who she was talking about. Apparently they were junkies that used to rob people for money to buy drugs. When he got there, the junkies were already gone and we felt relieved for the first time in hours. After that incident, I didn't wear my rings for a very long time. When I would leave the house, I was always looking back and feeling like somebody was watching me. And even after I got over those feelings, I did my best to avoid that street no matter what. The funny thing is, my high school was in that direction too, so for the first 3 years, I was taking the subway to get there until some of my classmates convinced me to take that route again. Fortunately, I never ran into them again. I recently moved to a new city, and I've been walking almost everywhere in order to get a better handle on my surroundings. It's actually kind of nice to live someplace where everything you need is in walking distance. I live in a large metro city on the west coast, and it's pretty well populated, so I feel safe walking alone most of the time. A couple of nights ago, I just got back from running errands when my boyfriend texted me from work and asked if I could pick up something at the store for him. I was admittedly a tiny bit annoyed, as I had just got back to the apartment, but I said okay. I figured I could just drive back to the store. Then again, the weather has just finally started getting nice here, so I decided to walk instead. The store is just a little over a mile away, and I was sure I could be there and back in no time, so I headed out. I'm prone to getting lost in the grocery store, drugstore, Target. I'll go in for one thing and find myself wandering around for quite a while, and suddenly my basket is full of things I never knew I needed. This evening was no exception, and I wound up lurking around the store for about an hour, tossing random things in the basket. I realized time and daylight was getting away from me, and I quickly checked out. I stepped out of the store. The air was still warm, but the sun was beginning to set. I started walking back towards the apartment the same way I had come. It was uneventful for the most part, and quieter than usual. I passed a few people out for an evening jog, and a dog walker or two, but no one else. I was about halfway home and heading into a slightly less populated, more industrial neighborhood when I stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change. The walk light was just about to come on for me when a man who looked like he was about to cross the street heading toward me suddenly walked in front of traffic that was beginning to move and crossed perpendicular to me. So once I crossed, he was now heading in the same direction as me, instead of away from me, just on the other side of the street, if that makes any sense. He was a young guy, maybe younger than me, early to mid-20s. He was decent looking and seemed well groomed. He was wearing grey jeans, a black t-shirt, and an orange hoodie. But something about the way he walked put me off. I don't really know how to explain it, but something about his walk just struck me as strange. The way he just ambled out into the street. Something was strange about him. I actually needed to cross to the side of the road he was on, but I was on alert. And something told me to keep my distance. So I stayed on my side of the street and kept heading in the direction of my apartment, feeling his eyes on me as I walked. Sure enough, as soon as some people passed him on the sidewalk, he began accosting them. Better them than me, I thought. There were two of them, and at least they had a dog. I quickened my pace and looked quickly over my shoulder. The people had brushed him off, and he was hurrying a bit more. It seemed like he was trying to catch up with me. I felt as though he was following me, but I couldn't be sure. He kept talking to himself, or maybe to me. It was hard to make out what he was saying from across the street, but he sounded pissed. We passed an office building, with him being on the same side of the street as the building. A man stepped outside just then to smoke, and Creeper Man began accosting him as well. I used the opportunity to quicken my pace again. I wanted to get away from this dude. I glanced over my shoulder again when he pointed at me.
"See that pretty little thing over there?"
he said with a smirk to the man having a smoke. I tried to give my best help me eyes to the guy with the cigarette. Smoking guy looked super annoyed, and he immediately put his cigarette out and went back inside. Thanks for nothing, smoking guy. I was totally alone now, and still about a 10-minute walk to my apartment. My city is definitely a walking city, and there are usually people everywhere, but of course, tonight there was no one. Maybe I'm just being silly, I thought. I do have a tendency toward being hypervigilant, so I decided to test him. I quickened my pace to almost a jog. Across the street, so did the man. I slowed down. He did too. I stayed standing at a crosswalk where I had a walk signal. So did he. I crossed against the light when it changed, and he did too. Fuck. And now he was really, really pissed. He was cursing up a storm and flailing his arms about. And his hoodie was off now. I really needed to be on his side of the street in order to get home at this point, but I was too scared to cross. And even if he let me alone, I didn't want him following me all the way to my apartment. I wasn't really sure what to do. I patted my jacket pocket, where I usually keep my mace, and I realized I had left it in a different jacket. I was alone, and armed with a bag of drugstore goodies. And now it was getting really fucking dark outside. I had walked several blocks out of the way at this point, afraid of getting too near to him. I don't know what kept him from just coming to my side of the street that whole time. I was trying my hardest to ignore him, and I think it was pissing him off, but maybe also keeping him at bay. The whole time, I never felt him take his eyes off me, and he was staring right at me when I dared to glance over. Finally, by some miracle, I came to a busy intersection where several people were standing on the corners. Crazy Creeper Man threw his arms in the air one last time and yelled, "God damn it!" and continued muttering to himself before suddenly turning and running in the opposite direction. I did a run-walk across the street and all the way home, glancing over my shoulder the whole time. I don't know what his intentions were, but it's one of the few times in my life where I've gotten that truly awful feeling in the pit of my stomach about a person. I'm so glad I chanced upon all those people at the right moment, and now I always carry my mace with me.